Today's session is on marketing or specifically product-led growth. We've got Kevin Marasco here with us today. As I mentioned, Kevin is one of my closest friends in the industry. He's probably one of the first people I met in the HCM world 15 plus years ago when he was at a company called Verve. So in background, Kevin has been in the HCM human capital space for, I guess you can expose that, Kevin, but it's been at least 15 years. I met Kevin when he was the VP of marketing at Verve. Verve was acquired by Taleo, which since got acquired by Oracle. So Kevin spent a number of years through that transition from Verve to Taleo to Oracle. After Oracle, he went and became the CMO of HireVue. HireVue was a category creator, and Kevin did a lot of amazing work, both brand as well as building HireVue as the de facto leader in digital interviewing. About 3 years ago, Kevin went to Zenefits to become the CMO of Zenefits. He's been doing some amazing work. And a couple things about Kevin. One of my biggest regrets in life is I never got to go to Marasco Beach, which was Kevin's pool in Jacksonville, Florida, which is his Vegas style pool. And I'll always regret never getting to Marasco Beach, but I've heard lots of great stories from there. Kevin has since relocated to the Bay Area, where he's now the CMO of Zenefits. And as I mentioned, has done a lot of great and pioneering work around product-led growth, building out content strategies, product strategies, inbound marketing strategies, refreshing the brand at Zenefits, and just has done a lot of amazing work. So I will shut up now and turn it over to Kevin. And thank you, Kevin, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jason, and thank all you for joining. Super excited to be part of the family, the Acadian family, and LP, and love what you guys are doing. I'm super excited about it. I'm 2 areas that I'm super passionate about: the future of work, and then all things sales, market, go to market. So excited to be able to kind of talk about those things today. What I thought, and thanks for the overly flattering intro, by the way. That's half of that's all BS stuff. So I'll pay you later. Owe you beers. I thought maybe we keep this interactive. I want this to be of the most value to you guys. I put together a few slides just to kind of frame the conversation. But let's keep it interactive. Just jump in at any time with questions, comments, thoughts. Again, just want this to be as valuable as possible. And I tried to like frame this from how being in your shoes, how I'd be thinking about things. I think what I love about early stage is you have a unique opportunity to shape things from the ground up. And sometimes I've gotten to situations where we're several years in, and I'm like, gosh, I wish we could go back and redo this thing, especially as fast as the world is changing. So I tried to frame some of this in terms of how I'd be thinking about it from an early stage. So today we'll talk about product-led marketing or product-led growth, PLG. One of the most exciting areas, and really kind of a rethinking of marketing in many ways. We could go deep into all these areas. Heck, we could go a couple of days just on PLG, but we'll try to keep it kind of high level. One thing I would encourage is to even, one of the concepts behind product-led growth as we dig in is to have like a really quality, an amazing product experience, which you always want to have. But I would also say sometimes people misperceive that with, hey, let's do marketing later. Let's wait, get the product and product experience right, then invest in marketing. But I'd actually be thinking about marketing right now, like in every one of these areas, from a brand marketing perspective, early on thinking about not only our identity, but what's our point of view on the market, how we're changing the market, and really starting to codify that thinking on the point of view, and then building content out around that point of view. And from a product marketing, thinking really early on about what's the actual problem you solve, what's the real problem you solve, what's the impact and root cause of that problem, and iterating on that, and then And one of the most important things, and it's a tough one, is the ideal customer profile. Not just necessarily who it is today, but perhaps who it should be. And I think early on, it's something that always keeps me up at night. Who I'm selling to today the right customer? And there's such variability in that, there's so many cases where that has evolved and changed, and ultimately companies that have become super successful was because they evolved that over time. So I think it's something I always try to keep an open mind on. And then that ties into all of that, builds into how we build our demand marketing strategy and specifically PLG. So I just to kind of encourage you to think about some of these things, very early on and always.
Hey, Kevin, when you talk about product-led growth, how do you define it? Because I think there's a belief in market it is either a freemium product or a free trial that has some period of time which there's an expected conversion. Oh, I think I led the witness here. So I love your definition, and then you going into why PLG.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of jump into definition. I think first I think why even I think of it as bigger as a complete shift and more importantly, like a mindset that impacts every area of the business, especially marketing and sales. But I think the first thing is why. If you think about what's happened over time, especially over the past decade or so, there's been a big power shift back to your point, almost 20 years ago now, just to date myself. But the buyer was really in control in the enterprise software era. Everything from on-premise to license agreements, but everything, if you're Oracle or SAP or IBM, you can go target a centralized buying center and they completely had control. And by the way, that parallels to a lot of changes that have taken place in the workplace. Companies used to be in control. Now there's been a power shift to employees. Employees have more freedom, more choice, the rise of the gig and freelance economy. And now it's all about the employee experience. You have the rise of bring your own device, where remember when we had to, I only could use what technology the company had. I couldn't bring my own iPhone or Android or BlackBerry. But now you have really the consumerization that's taking place of the enterprise, the power of employees, and a shift of power to users. And that's like a big shift that's taking place. And even purchasing power and purchasing influence is now driven by users. So, I probably have 100 sales and marketing tools that we use. Very few of those, it was me. I didn't mandate those. It was the team, my various teams that came and said, hey, we need this for marketing automation. We need this for attribution. We need this for whatever, based on bake-offs, testing it, actual usage, which is one of the first questions I asked before we write a check. But it's those decisions were driven bottoms up versus me saying, hey, we're going to use HubSpot or Marketo or Salesforce. So there's a kind of a massive power shift. And then, Jason, to your question, how I define product-led growth is inverting the traditional go-to-market model to be bottoms up. So, the legacy software companies, and not necessarily enterprise software. This is also true for, even in the SMB market, folks went to the centralized buyer and then forced down the decision, right? And, the classic multi-billion dollar, the enterprise software market as we know it today, a lot of it, that's how it was born. But now going to the users and growing ground up, going from users to influencers to purchase makers to people who ratify like a CFO, that's the product-led growth model, is basically starting at the bottom at the user instead of just the buyer. And then ultimately the influence goes up the chain to the buyer. So that's the fundamental shift that actually shifts everything. Because if just take marketing, for example, if I'm marketing to the buyer, I can, and that buyer's, making a, multi-million dollar decision, I can spend more on that buyer, and I'm going to use different channels for that buyer. If I'm marketing to the users, my economics are completely different. My conversion rates are completely different. What they care about, their persona is entirely different. The marketing channels I use to reach them are entirely different. But not only do I have to be able to market to the users, but I have to be able to market to the users and then basically grease the path for them to go up the pyramid I still have to be able to have a conversation and sell and close the buyer, whoever that may be, the economic buyer, the decision maker, et cetera. But I have to be able to, I call it full funnel marketing, being able to go up and down this pyramid. And that's just from, marketing. And we'll kind of jump into impacts to other areas of the business too.
Yeah, Kevin, I'd love, and maybe you don't have to do it right now, but to share with the folks here how you actually did it at Zenefits. Obviously, you guys are more focused on SMB, but how like the real life of how you did it at Zenefits, I think would be really, really interesting. Tools that you're using, processes, how you think about conversion, all that good stuff. If you're willing to share. Yeah,
totally. And at 3 of the 4 companies I've been at, we've had a variation of this. And Zenefits is one of the most fascinating because we actually started as a freemium, we completely pivoted the business model. And we kind of went up to more of a classic SaaS model. And now we have a high velocity hybrid approach of trial and freemiums. And happy to talk through that and some interesting examples and learnings. As far as the go-to-market motion, in general, the classic models, the salesperson sells the product, and a PLG model, the product really sells itself. Maybe not 100%, but it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's burning a lot of the calories. The product itself is doing it. And historically, you kind of had these handoffs that take place. Marketing generates leads that the SDRs qualify, that then pass over to the AE, that then goes to an implementation process and then to product. Where now these roles are actually, we're all working in an integrated fashion. Marketing's helping get people in the product. We're monitoring people through the product to see what they're doing, what are the milestones, triggers, and how do we move them forward. And then if and when needed, sales comes in, a customer success comes in. And it, depending on the size of the customer, et cetera, there's a little bit of variation there. But it's really an integrated effort versus this more linear continuum. And, another important shift is historically, it was more like first you buy the software and then you get to try it, where now it's just get people in trying, then get the right people to buy. And another big shift, that really impacts sales and marketing is historically you try to target, is this the right person that's the right fit? And then determine if they have pain. Where in a product-led growth model, it's basically you're trying to see who has pain by getting them in the product. And if they get in the product, that's indicators, intent that they have the pain. Then you got to do a good job of qualifying and discovering while they're in the product to see if they're really a good fit or not, and then routing people the appropriate way. So I'll give you an example of how we handle that today. Our main CTA is just getting people into the product, and we have 3 sales motions. If a company has less than 25 employees, it's completely automated through technology, AI-driven chat, email, in-product notifications, and things like that. Because I know that the economics, I can't afford to have sales reps touching this 3 times. If they have 25 to 100 employees, it's a transactional sell. If it's over 100 employees, we know we can afford more, so we more quickly route those to a salesperson to in a little bit more manual way, see if they have fit, a little bit more of a consultative sell. But that's a Kevin, fundamental shift.
I'd be curious, so I recently, I think you invited me to Superhuman, which has done a lot of innovative things around product-led growth. But one of the things was I was going through their sign-on process. One of the questions they asked me was like integrations I use. I said HubSpot, and they said, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want you as a customer, right? I'm curious how you guys have thought about it at Zenefits. Do you have knockout questions in a PLG model at Zenefits, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are knockout questions, and you want to, 10, 20 years ago, I'd have a discovery questionnaire that a SDR or an AE asks folks. And now how we do that through technology, number one, enrichment. So as soon as someone visits the site, I'm looking up their IP address and I have a set of data tools that are looking up information to see everything we know about the demographics, firmographics, what company is this person associated with, what industry is that in, how many employees do they have, rather than have to fill out a form, which is a pain. If we can just collect that information, we can do progressive profiling and save, which is going to be a better experience for everybody, right? Then second, using intent signals based on behaviors. And then based on that information, we're basically qualifying people in and out and routing them to the appropriate channel through the appropriate mediums. And then if that means disqualifying, doing that in the most graceful way possible. And so like in your superhuman example, they probably learned that they're not yet at the stage where they work well with HubSpot. So they want to know that at the right point in time and say, hey, this is just not going to be a good fit. You're not going to have a good experience. You're not a good customer. You're not, now, and hopefully they have a nurture. So when they do have an integration with HubSpot, you can circle back.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Any questions from anyone?
Jason H., you asked me a question privately. Do you want me to ask it or do you want to ask it?
I can ask it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, we're a startup. 6 people. It's a social app, but we have a B2B component. It's more of a marketplace kind of multi-sided platform. Anyways, my big question is, we have a chief product officer, but we have nobody in marketing or growth hacking, or, if you were to hire one person, who would that be and what skill set would they have? Would it be a digital marketer or would it be a CMO or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would kind of coming back to, here's how I'd be thinking about this from, one person startup, I'd be thinking about like the buckets of marketing, the work to do. And I'd take this on, as a founder to begin with. If I were to super simplify this from a brand perspective, it's understanding what's your point of view, because you've built something, you have a vision for something, and not only about your product and your solution, but how that impacts and perhaps even changes the market. And I'd start evangelizing that point of view from a brand perspective. That will lead to thought leadership and credibility over time. Second, the product, from a product marketing, you're not going to hire a product marketing team or even a CMO early, but I just really hone in on what's the actual problem you solve and who's the ideal customer profile that has that problem. And to the degree where that pain's so great, they're going to be willing to invest. The demand, so you can kind of take that on as a CEO, as a founder. You're not going to want to take on this demand bucket, including the product-led growth. So to your question of who's my first hire, I'd be thinking about a growth marketer. I wouldn't think about a CMO. CMO, you're going to need when you get much bigger. It's solving business issues, go-to-market challenges that are at a bigger stage. I'd start with like a hustler growth marketer, kind of manager to maybe director level, depending on. So as you get a little bit bigger, probably thinking kind of manager to director level. That's all things growth marketing, so that can manage acquisition channels. This a technologist that understands marketing automation, because you can kind of pull your weight in the 2 buckets on the left, but you're going to need help on the demand side.
Kevin, what are the essential tools for a pre-seed, seed stage company in the demand side? That either like tools that you could use relatively inexpensively, or like if you were going to maximize the dollars you spent, where would you put it?
So for PLG, for product-led growth motion, and I'd be thinking you can start simple and cheap and free, right? So Google Analytics, free 99. I'd be using that. Firebase, if you're on mobile, native mobile, I'd be using Firebase, with which Google Bot connects in. And the key with GA and Firebase is event tracking. And I'd say my advice here, and this is where you need kind of back to having a technologist who's someone's like tech forward. They don't necessarily need to know this, but they need to be able to learn pretty quickly. Ideally, they do have some experience with some of these tools and concepts. But the big thing is tracking events. What are users doing? What are they doing when? And even if you're not using all these events upfront, that's okay. You just want to start tracking them, right? Because you can't go back and track them. So if you start tracking them now, then you can start to analyze them and understand them. So I'd start with GA and Firebase. Google Data Studio is pretty cool because it can start to roll up data and look at trends. And it's free as well. As you get, as you grow and scale, Google Data Studio will go to like now I use Snowflake, Snowplow, and Looker as an analytics stack, but start simple for free with something like Google Data Studio. Optimizely is great for split testing, running experiments to say, hey, we want to see, is a red button better or a blue button? Should we put the button here or there? So Optimizely, Pindo is great for in-product event tracking. And most of these apps have free versions that you can start with. So Pindo and Heap are kind of more detailed event tracking and logging. Full Stories, cool. Check that out if you have it. That you can get a deeper dive into user behavior, what they're doing in your software or not doing. And then Drift, if you're not familiar, is a great, amazing chat tool. It does way more than chat, but that's the starting point. And then Vera is kind of like a lightweight, modern marketing automation where you can automate email nurtures and things like that. And kind of how I'd be using, again, literally you can start with Google Analytics, but it's tracking kind of events, seeing what people are doing, identifying what your markers are in the product. It could be, we want someone to fill out a form, sign up for a trial, in the trial, be active, become a customer, tracking those things. And then at each stage, seeing what happens from one stage to the next, developing some hypothesis to improve that conversion rate. How do we get more people to do blank? And then trying things in the product and outside of the product through email, et cetera, to kind of intervene and nudge people along.
Kevin, this is AJ. I had a question for you. For the low end of the market, the cost of acquisition is very expensive. Did you use credit card sales, or what is the best practices there which you have used successfully?
Great question.
Because we can't afford the sales side of it.
Yes, exactly. And so it kind of gets to this, like, what I call form walls, try walls, and pay walls, which these are the gates to get into into your database and then into your product. And what's happening now with this kind of the rise of product-led growth is reducing these walls, breaking them down or moving them, further to the right where people can get engaged more. So I recently removed almost all the forms on our website. People, in lieu of chat, now people can chat because I'm looking them up. So removing form walls, letting people try by maybe just entering their email address instead of all this information, because you can still communicate with them. And then to your point on paying, what I recommend is letting people experience and try the product before they paying for it. So not doing a paid trial, but doing a free trial, just so they can experience your product, see it, feel it. You can pull them into your funnel, and then show them value early. That's the key thing, is letting them solve a problem for them fast, let them experience value. And then, if you're down market, I try to automate all this and then allow them, upsell them, allow them to swipe their credit card, pay. And then if you can get bigger deals, then layer in sales. And it's kind of more a ladder motion to layer in the sales, if that makes sense.
Kevin, on the try walls, I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyways. Like, how do you think about how long that should be? Should it be 7 days? Should it be 14 days? Should it be 30 days? I guess more of the question is, how do you make that decision on how long the try wall should be?
It's totally different for every business. I think the key thing I'd be thinking about is, how long does it take you to deliver value to a user? So, and I start with, what problem do we solve for the user? And in an ideal state, I think I have a slide that just kind of, like, this is not necessary, but this would be the ideal state. The more of these you can check, the more primed you are for this bottoms up model. And I would argue that the bottoms up version of the bottoms up model can work in almost any business. But if you solve a clear problem and the user can get value quickly, you want to pull that, make sure they're able to do that before your trial ends. And you need to do everything you can to make sure that happens. And that gets into your experiments.
And is that qualitative or quantitative or both?
It's both. It's both. Yeah, it's both. So you want to, identify what it is that, talk to your early users and understand what pain did you solve the most for them, understand how you did that, and then see if you can bring that forward without cannibalizing your whole value proposition, right? So if that's the only thing you do, then that can still work, but you're going to have to create what we call a governor, which is like, okay, you can only do that one time. So here's an example of how Slack does this. You can use Slack for free. You can search Slack, but you can only search up to like 10,000 messages, right? So they allow you to get value, but hey, if you want to search more than that, now you have to pay. And there's a bunch of governors like that. And there's, different types of governors include number of users added, number of times I can share something, storage amount, and so on and so forth. So what I'm typically how I think about this, I'm going to take a piece of the product that offers tangible value quickly and pull that into either a freemium or a trial.
Okay.
And I'll get here. I can give you guys an example of that. Here's one that we do at Zenefits. So our product does a ton of stuff, but one of the acute issues that a very small business has is they don't have an employee handbook. And now, especially in remote work, they need one. There's for compliance reasons. Employees, 1 out of 2 employees is looking for the guidance of what they can and cannot do, everything from vacation time off, et cetera. So that was a part of things. So what we did is we took and basically made a freemium version that people can use for free. So historically, I might ask all this information in a form to get them into a trial. But now what we did is say, hey, we'll let you build your own handbook. So if I just want to build one for Acadian, what I'm doing is I'm not filling out a form to try a product. I'm saying, hey, we'll help you build a handbook. And so I could just build one here for Acadian. So see what I'm doing? I'm capturing information to build a handbook.
Do you need my credit card? Just
yeah.
Kidding.
Jason, what's your?
Jason.corsello@acadianventures.com. Oh boy, I'm in the funnel now.
You're in the machine.
Except you don't have the password for
it. So what this is doing, this is just helping. I'm basically building I just built a handbook real quickly, right? I could drop on your logo and all that type of stuff. But what just happened is I was able to get information, your company name, all that, and get value. I can download this PDF and I can, totally customize this thing. It's just, like an editor, but this is like a marketing tool we built that gives value for free. That basically is just one of many connection points. It's like kind of like a micro trial. So that's how I'd be thinking about, hey, how can I capture information that delivers value back? Let them experience the product and build something.
So Kevin, a question, do you actually use that as a part of your marketing pitch, or is it just there because people come in and look at the site and then they get something? But you potentially could say, hey, come and build the free employee handbook and start looking at that data.
Exactly. That's it. So here's kind of how we did this. And this is the kind of classic play. We looked at, okay, there's a million reason people come into the, looking for benefits, payroll, HR, et cetera. And we pulled that forward. Why? Well, one of the top reasons, surprisingly to me, was that they're looking for their first ever employee handbook. And there's a few reasons why they might do that. Their time off policy, et cetera. But we looked at and found, okay, this is one of the top reasons. Okay, now we looked at, and try to understand that, unpack that. Why are they trying to do that? What are they searching for? So just using Google Trends, we found here's what they're searching for. And then we built that tool to answer your question for marketing. Then we built content around that. And then now that's discoverable by Google. So if I search employee handbook, once I get past the ads, the first thing that comes up is SHRM, then Workable, then we're number 3. And so I click, and there's a ton of content, right? We've developed, here's 7 employee handbook things you should build. And there should be a CTA on here. Here you can see, here's a free template to create your own. So that then gets, we have these CTAs that get them from that content right into this handbook builder. And there's a million examples like that, right? So that's kind of reverse engineering. What acute problem are you solving? How can you pull some of that forward and then build content around that?
And presumably all of this is flowing back into your marketing automation system, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
So Kevin, I think you're selling to corporate benefit teams, right? When it comes to larger clients, what strategies are you using in that case? Is that still the same strategy, or do you apply different strategies? Because a company which has 10,000 employees or 20,000, even 100,000, they're not going to go for a handbook because they have enough resources to do that. They probably have a really beautiful handbook. How are you going after them using the same, not the same, but the PLG strategy?
Yeah, I'll show you an example. So this is real time. Haven't even launched this, but people every year look for insurance. Employees, both employees, supplementary coverage. Should I get this plan versus that plan? Companies, obviously, always shopping rates. And historically, that's been a manual process. And you can do it. Our product makes it amazing. But what we did is we said, okay, this is an acute problem, again, that people have every year. What if we could consumerize this for the end users? And in insurance, in our case, most, not all, but well, I should say a lot of companies have to get the ACA, the stock ACA plans. It's basically price locked under 50 and 100 employees, right? So we built a library of all those plans, as well as additional ACA alternative plans, in some cases saving 30% on insurance. And I can now, instead of having to talk to insurance brokers, I can shop for insurance plans right here in 2 seconds. And not only can I shop, but I'll show you. I can see how insurance works, all that type of stuff. I can say, oh, okay, let me look at how this plan from Kaiser compares to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I can compare them side by side. And you can see we basically built like an Amazon-like experience where I can see the details of the plans and filter, and you get the idea. And then I could basically go to checkout. We consumerize it. So that just gets people in when someone searches for, small business insurance plans or, Kaiser plans for small business in Arizona. It pops up. And so we're using content marketing and search engine optimization to be discoverable.
Was this built by your team or the product team, or was it a collaborative effort?
Great question. So product, PLG impacts everything. And in this case, this is a prime example. Product had built a literally like a PRD to do this because customers were asking for it. And they had a plan, and we basically said, hey, and I'll show you kind of how we structure our growth pod, but we basically said, hey, you guys, instead of you guys building the whole thing, let's tie this into our website for discoverability, for SEO, for campaign nurtures, for experiments, etc. So what we did is said, hey, instead of you guys building the whole thing, you build out the back end through APIs and microservices and let us control the front end. We already have the infrastructure, we have the tech stack, we have the experiment, we're running daily experiments, etc. And so that's what we did. So the whole front end we control, and that means we can embed it into all these different places to improve discoverability and run growth experiments while they control all the back end. And we same thing with the handbook builder. So increasingly, so that's changed how we market and how we work with product and engineering, and them too. Allows us all kind of to focus in our core competency areas. So it's impacting, and that's why kind of back to the question of like my first marketing hire, I'd be thinking tech forward, like a growth marketer, a technologist that can collaborate very closely with engine product. So, and how let's see if I have here's kind of how I think about, like, we have a growth pod that's running these experiments. And this is how I'd be thinking about marketing from day one. It's a hybrid, like a combination, cross-functional combination of product, marketing, and engineering to start, as you're really, from I think the stages you're at now. Over time, as you evolve that, you want to have analytics, sales, and CX in that too. And it might start with a person that's doing it. That was the kind of like 5-10 years ago, a growth hacker. But then it's evolved to a function, an actual team is doing things, to now a cross-functional pod. And the biggest, and perhaps the bigger thing, is developing it into a culture from early on, where you're thinking like this bottoms up. You're thinking about continuous experimentation and iteration, and kind of this full funnel approach from day one.
Kevin, how long do you allow this experiments to run? Are these days, weeks, months?
It depends on the volume. So we a typical flow for us is we run 2-week campaign sprints. So all the marketing we run like a derivative of Agile, if you will. And we run bi-weekly campaign sprints. Sometimes they'll go longer depending on if it's something that's seasonal, but we're basically doing a new experiment and test every couple of weeks. But we're also monitoring certain things daily. And that's how we do product too. So like when we release a new feature, we don't just release it to 100%, we release it to 5% and then 10% and monitor and see the usage. And that's kind of how we do marketing too. So we'll say, hey, we have this idea for this employee handbook builder. Let's roll it out. Let's see what works. Let's iterate on it. And if it's really working, in our case, if it's in some cases, we'll see it's like driving thousands of downloads. And so we're like, hey, this is actually, we might now put paid marketing behind this. We might develop more organic marketing behind this, but it's a great way to get yield too. So, I think a common pitfall is trying to do all this stuff. I'd encourage you to pick a couple big rocks. You solve this problem. Let's build some content, have a point of view on it, and then you build, marketing around that and atomize that content. Instead of doing 20 different things, just do 1 or 2 things and try to do them really well.
Yeah.
So Kevin, I think it depends on the company and the product, but if you're using some of these e-commerce networks like Shopify and all of those, it's a little bit difficult to do many things on a fly like you were talking about in terms of testing, because those platforms have their limitations. And I'm wondering if you had experience with them.
Sure. Tools like, is this Shopify specifically?
Yeah, let's talk about Shopify if you know them better.
Yeah, so there's a few ways to, experiment. Here's kind of how I think about marketing as an example. At a high level, there's kind of like I think about these 3 primary marketing motions. There's like pure viral, like everything from word of mouth to referrals to people organically. If you solve a pain that's acute and big enough in a great enough way, where you have ecstatic customers, it tends to kind of go viral, right? And you want to always be doing everything you can to build as much of that into your product and customer experience as possible. And there's a lot of marketing involved in how you do that. Then, and PLG, the more that you have, the more set up it is for product-led growth success. That doesn't mean it has to be super viral product. The big bucket, like in the middle, is organic. I think about like how, SEO, organic social, it's a long game, but building content that organically helps you get discovered and get them into a trial, et cetera. Then then there's paid. You can experiment on all these all of these experiments on, driving virality, experiments, and that could be in your product. So it might not even have anything to do with marketing. It might just be like pure something in the product to drive an outcome. There's experiments in organic related to certain types of content and channels and ways to get backlinks. And then from paid, you can run experiments on paid as well. So it might not be more, hey, we're going to run this A/B test on this landing page, but you could experiment with things in the product. I mean, even on Shopify, try different. Hey, let's feature this on the homepage versus this. Let's try this type of user flow versus this flow, and let's see how conversions go from this to checkout to cart abandonment, etc. So there's still things I think even on Shopify. First there's everything that plugs into Shopify now, how they're connecting into on the paid side into social marketing platforms. So you can run experiments on those platforms, but even on Shopify itself, you could test different page layouts, information architectures, featuring different products and categories and things like that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Kevin, can I ask you, we sell into high-end kind of enterprise clients, so we tend to, or we're trying to manage an account-based marketing approach. And just life has got a lot more challenging, obviously, with it all being remote, because we would have worked from a field sales, conferences, speaking engagements, those sorts of ways of attracting. Have you come across anything particularly creative other than the usual webinars, emails, the classic routes to attracting people in? Is there anything particularly creative that you've seen that people are doing on a B2B basis that is, really making it attractive to kind of draw in? I mean, we don't need thousands of people, we need hundreds of people, you know what I mean? So you can be an awful lot more focused, and we're trying things like executive breakfasts and evening cocktails, and all these kind of things, but it's slow because it's so small. You're reaching such a small crowd every time. But have you seen anything that you think is particularly good?
Yeah, a few things I've seen in that type of go-to-market motion that are working, that folks are getting pretty good success with right now for ABM. First, I think that this is foundational really with anything, but especially in a hyper-targeted, more of an ABM type model, is understanding like what's a specific, like the problem that they're solving. Can we build content around that that's so unique and different that talks to them in such a more specific, super specific way? I'll give you a real-time example. We have an ABM program we're running right now. We're unique in our ability to serve the cannabis industry for small business, which is a booming industry. And so we've built specific content that talks to that, and then we're getting that in front of them on digital channels. So just being super specific with the content you develop. So try to develop content that talks to the problems they have now in the in a pandemic world or whatever, this specific, and then try to get that in front of them in digital channels. Second is offline. A lot of folks are going to direct mail, and there's tools like Sendoso, Alice, Postal.io that basically are modernizing the direct mail channel and personalizing it. So they can take data you have a list of ABM accounts that you're targeting. And you can automate this based on intent if you want. Like when you see certain signals, you can mail them whatever you want. I mean, it could be a tchotchke, a door opener. I'd recommend tying back to the problem you're solving and have something specific content that gets them, and it'll factor their home address now. It actually validate. So that's a good way to kind of cut through the digital clutter in the work from home world, is where they have a package, and it doesn't have to be that expensive, right? But a lot of folks are finding success in that and saying like really high conversion rates right now. And again, they're trying to automate this, not the old school, just mail it. And then the third thing, these intimate digital events. So a couple of examples. One is like coffee talks, where you get together a group and invite them to just not a webinar, not a virtual event, not an online version of a big conference, but it's just an intimate, casual chat to talk about the problem they have, trends. So, and again, if you have good content that these are acute problems they have, I'd build like a coffee talk around that and invite them to network with peers and step back from selling. I'd recommend just let the conversation just kind of help shape the conversation. And if you do it ongoing, you can kind of build thought leadership and credibility and start to build relationships. It's really more about relationship building. So these kind of like small events. And then if you combine all those things together, you get in front of them with digital, some direct, and then these, kind of more intimate, casual events. And the other one, kind of like the coffee talks, folks are doing, if it's like high end where there's I don't know what your economics are, but if you could have more affordability and higher, potential value of customers, folks are doing everything from virtual wine tastings to like fun events, not just academic, but making it fun. And I'm hearing like folks are getting good turnout and results. People just want something different to do.
Nice. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kev, one of the things I love that you've done at Zenefits is build out Workist, which, that's more of a long tail versus a short tail. But I would encourage all of you guys to check that out. I'd love to talk about that for a second, because I think of it more as like an online magazine that you guys essentially control the content. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to publish content, tools, templates, but also, talk about things that are relevant for that moment in time. You're pulling up here. Talk about how you came up with this, and then maybe how this flows into your model.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you why we did it, first of all. So when I started at Zenefits, so kind of back to these three buckets, a few years ago, we were paying for 85 out of every 100 leads. And we were paying, by the way, too much. We've got that cost down we've reduced it by about 70% by optimizing it. But we're only getting about 15% of leads through organic and viral. And we wanted to grow that. We'll cross where most leads this year now will be organic. But it's that shift, right? And that slashes the acquisition cost. So selfishly from a marketing and business perspective, I want to get more free leads instead of paying for them all. Second, from a customer point of view, small businesses, there's about 7 million in the United States. And they don't have the tools, the departments, the teams, the manpower that enterprise companies do to manage payroll, benefits, and HR. And in most cases, we're selling to the small business owner, CFO, an operator, and then in some cases an HR person. There are over 100 new HR compliance laws passed last year. They can't keep up with all that. So I talked to customers, and they're like, not only are you guys a technology, you're a partner. Everything I need to know about dealing with my workforce, I look to you. And we started probing, well, where else do you go? And they're like, well, there's like things like SHRM, but they're awful. It's like 1980s. It's horrible. And so we just had a hypothesis. What if we built a resource center? What if we built something like a Mashable for HR? Would you be interested? And they said, not only would we be like, they basically said, we'd be more than interested. Please do this for us. And so that was the thesis behind it. And so we launched it just about 11 months ago. And the strategy behind it was kind of, as I outlined, like, hey, who's the ideal customer profile? What problems do they have? What's the metadata, if you will, around that? Like, what are they searching for? What buckets do those fall in? And then we built content around it. And we basically built and by the way, like, this is a pretty like really small, lean team, like a couple people. We use contractors, freelancers, gig workers to do both the build and the content. And now we've launched what's basically like a mini media site. So we publish 3-4 times a day, where before we were publishing once or twice a week. And that's it. So we launched it, 10 months ago. And now today we get over 500,000 visitors per month. We've gone from 0 to 50,000 subscribers in the past, just a little under a year. So now that's and we've created a whole new channel, and it's all in that organic bucket, which is building content, getting it optimized for search, and then syndicating it out to other outlets and social. And that's basically the playbook.
And do you think so? Presumably, it's hitting top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, even bottom of the funnel. Is that how you think about it?
Not.
Or is it
We
different?
think of top of funnel. We think about it. We were going and paying Facebook and Google and Instagram and LinkedIn and Pinterest for all these leads. You know, it at one time was 100, down to 50, now down to $5 to $10. But I'm like, hey, what if we could build our own channel and build a relationship with them? We have our own audience. So it's total top of the funnel. So we're not looking to. It's really not bottom of middle of funnel. And that's actually a good question, because you have to draw that line. And so our goal with Workus is to help. It's not to market. It's not long-term. Yes, we'll get them there. But in the pandemic, the small businesses were coming to us for status on PPP loans where they could get a loan. And we built stuff in the product that helped accelerate that and help hundreds of businesses get the PPP loans. But it started here. So like coronavirus, we had a whole resource center with status by state. It was just to help the small businesses. And that was, so you have to shift your mindset to start with where they are and helping them with content versus trying to sell them. And the only place, as an example, like here, I can go here. We started with content and then built tools. Like here's some, templates for requiring masks for small businesses, think retailers and things like that. And, you can download them for free. And then how we get them into our funnel, we're not even going for a sell here to get them into a trial. We're saying, hey, do you want to check out one of the tools like the employee handbook builder thing I showed you? Like now we're integrating those things at this level. We're saying, hey, here's a employee handbook template. If you want to build your own, click here. And that's taking something that used to be in our product and market it, kind of putting a marketing wrapper around it. And we've done the same thing with these, some of these tools here at the bottom.
Do you use, folks in the industry to build the content out? Do you let other companies kind of send content into this place as well? Or how does that work?
Great question. Short answer is yes. We build the editorial calendar and it maps to our SEO strategy, what terms we want to rank to. So we manage that. Then we find subject matter experts, and that includes in our ecosystem partners and things like that. We do stuff with partners all the time. They'll even contribute. And then the big thing is architecting out we'll do a pillar piece of content like this. We have a coronavirus comeback kit, for example, and it has a few tools in it. We'll build, outline that internally, and then we'll contract out, freelancers to do it. That's very economical. And then, so we kind of use a hybrid of partners to contribute, but we're managing the process, contractors. And then in some cases, if it's really strategic related to our point of view, we'll do that more internally.
Where do you find the freelancers? Very tactical. Like, is there a place that you've had success, or is it just random?
Yeah. So the first wave, we target specific people who have subject matter in our case, it depends on what it is. Okay. So we're doing more of this. This ties to the rise of the gig, the remote workforce and gig economy. It's actually kind of fascinating. So like when I started at Zenefits, 100% of marketing was in San Francisco. Today, less than half is in San Francisco. We were also 95% full-time workers. Today, we're probably about 70% full-time. The entire web team, the entire creative team are gig workers mostly in Europe. And so because I was paying so expensive to have full-time designers and developers in San Francisco, now I'm getting, exponential yield by basically outsourcing that. But we treat them like a member of the team. So that's just kind of the philosophy. And then Jason, to your question, it depends. So if it's a strategic role, we're going to want like ongoing, we'll use talent networks, basically referrals and things like that to find, hey, we need a really good front end developer or back end developer or something like that. Then if it's strategic content, we're going after a specific person that's a good writer, that knows this topic, and in some cases that might have a network. They write for Forbes or something like that. If it's bottom, what we call kind of bottom of the pyramid, just filler, just more stuff that needs to be done, we'll use some of the freelance platforms to find those folks.
Okay.
So it's always, I kind of try to think about how important to this is. What's the duration of the relationship? Is it just a one-time project or ongoing thing? We're going to need continuous help with our WordPress engine. And then I'm looking, that'll determine how much kind of time and effort and money is spent.
Kev, I think we're approaching the hour here. And I'd love to maybe one or two more questions. Johnny, did you have a question there?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask on that. Apologies if you covered this a bit. I got here a bit late, but we're very early stage and have two product founders with very little experience in the marketing side, going after product-led growth and wanting to think through our content strategy and hiring specifically towards that. We found someone who's doing 20 hours a week on kind of some really basic stuff to just fill holes, but I suppose my question is, who should our first meaningful marketing hire be in order to balance the kind of pragmatism of, watching our burn, but also make sure that there's someone who can actually teach us and lead rather than just be another resource that we need to kind of brief?
Yeah, great question. I'd be in that, if it's more of a kind of, if you're leaning towards more of a bottoms-up product-led growth model to begin with from a business model, then I definitely would recommend the first hire being a growth marketer, a technologist, someone who's very tech forward, that gets digital. And the main buckets are going to be, web marketing, marketing operations, and marketing automation. So they ideally have pretty savvy on automation, think HubSpot, Drift, et cetera, and kind of modern tools, and then analytics and tracking, Google Analytics, et cetera, and perhaps even getting into some of the, channels. Should you do experiment with paid, that could be fine. You can always outsource some of that, but ideally they want to have the core of the kind of digital marketing, the stuff here on the right. And I'd be contracting. You can kind of, as founders, you can kind of pull your weight on the brand marketing. What's your point of view in the product marketing? Who's our customer? That type of stuff. You can also pull in consultants to kind of help with that, and agencies. You can also pull in agencies for paid. So I probably wouldn't hire them needing to know the paid, because I would call it safe. There's agencies that do that really good. But the things that are closer to kind of more core growth marketing, web engineering, the automation, that's the first hire I'd make, and kind of more manager, director level. And sometimes you can do temp to perm. The demand for this type of work is so great that a lot of folks are freelancing this. And in many cases, I'll try before I buy. I'll see if there's a good fit and they can perform. And then if it goes good and they're having fun and you're having fun, then you make it real.
If you come across it, just send the names to us.
Yeah, I know a couple folks I'm happy to send. And like I said, and they kind of tend to ebb and flow. Sometimes they will only do contract. And I think that's fine, because I think you can start, but I look for their experience, like what they've done, like at this early stage, because it's time to market, time to value. You don't want to like go off course, right? So I'd be looking for someone who's done something similar to what you're trying to accomplish, and a similar context, and they have the chops that they could kind of do this. And typically I'd be looking, I want them to have a network too, probably a network of freelancers and things like that. They might have, hey, I know someone who's a good web designer. I know someone who's good at writing, and I know someone who's good at all the automation that they can build HubSpot workflows or Marketo workflows or whatever.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, would you expect that person to then manage a bunch of writers and commission work?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd be looking for that. Have they done that? And do they have a network? That'll free you up, right? And that's the type of person you want to kind of evolve and groom in that role, because they're going to have to scale up quickly. So they need to be able to manage it first, starting with agencies and gig workers and contractors, and then over time, full-time people too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Johnny, I think as Kevin mentioned too, that I think for what you guys are doing, experimentation is really, really interesting, right? So folks that have actually done and proven out like different growth experimentations would be really interesting.
Kevin, when you say similar context, do you mean not just say stage of company and experimental kind of capacity, but how important is the industry kind of end customer experience to that person's skill set?
Industry, usually I would say industry usually doesn't matter. A good marketer will start. So there's two things. Yeah, at the end of the day, a good marketer can flex the skill set over. No, first thing you'll start with is who is the customer, what are their pain points, et cetera, regardless of industry and stage and size. So I wouldn't worry about industry. I would worry about context in terms of the go-to-market motion. So, if you're enterprise and you're still, okay, you kind of need to evolve to more of a bottoms-up model or experiment, I'd probably want someone who has some experience in that motion. If it's full bottoms up from the beginning, I'd be looking for someone who has that experience because you got to hit the ground running. So I would think about that go-to-market motion and the marketing areas that will matter and deliver the most value to your business at this kind of stage.
All right, guys, I think we're past the hour here. So what I'd love to do is just kind of wrap up and thank Kevin for his time today. Kevin, I hope you don't mind, but would you mind sharing contact information if people wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, not at all. Happy to. And happy to take any, if there's some kind of follow-up things, happy to do that. Sounds like someone had a question about some contractors. Happy to kind of make some recommendations if there's anyone I know or in my network.
Cool. So I'll pass it along after the call. I'll share the replay if you guys want to re-listen to it. As Kevin mentioned, he's a limited partner in our fund, so he's got a vested interest and stake in your success. So, use him as necessary, and he's a guy that's got a ton of experience and knowledge. So don't, speaking on behalf of him, don't hesitate to reach out. Kevin, thanks for your time. I'll get a nice gift in the mail to you, and I really appreciate your time and insight and sharing this with all of our founders here. And for everyone on the call, I'm looking at doing our next speaker series sometime in later November, so I'll get that out here shortly. Probably more focused on sales playbooks, things like that. So look for that coming. And thanks again for your time, and thanks, Kevin, for presenting today. Have a great day, have a great week, and I'm sure we'll talk all soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Jason, I missed the first minute or two. Are you sharing this deck?
Yeah, we'll pass the I'll pass the deck as well as the replay of the presentation here right after.
Great. Cool. Thank you.
All right, guys. Cheers.